leadership. I mean, we spoke now about Minister Bheki Cele and Ronald Lamola, to name a few. Does that mean anything to you by people making such a big thing and fuss about this whole thing now?
Well, it's I suppose it's a good thing because it's demonstrated how Parliament actually functions. It's a little embarrassing that this fuss is being made about me because I think the committee as a whole performed quite well in that inquiry, and that inquiry continues. And that is how the oversight function of Parliament actually works. So, that is the duty of the portfolio committees to hold government institutions to account, and it's done, on a daily basis. Perhaps not quite as aggressively as I did it on that day, but nevertheless, that is the function of Parliament. So it's good that people are starting to understand what Parliament does. That Parliament, in fact, does or tries to hold public institutions to account to see what they're doing with taxpayers' money on a daily basis.
I think that's a very good point that you're making, Advocate, is because the fact that we as a South African public, we've got a certain sense of what we think happens in Parliament. And of course, none of us have law degrees. And I think that's a good thing about something like social media, for example, because you have been fighting for justice for decades. This is not a new thing. So it's very interesting to see the reaction of the public towards you now, and especially with something so high profile, like, for example, the Thabo Bester case.
Sure. I think the reason why people reacted in the way they did is because people are so desperate for some sort of accountability. Government officials seem to sail through. I'm sorry, I keep looking for where my dogs are because they're going to make a noise, I can assure you.
That's fine.
People are so used to government and government officials and individuals that are connected and with perceived power getting away with everything. Justice is slow, and there's been very little accountability. And so I think just that little bit of accountability really excited everybody. It's a bit of an indictment of where we are as a country, that that we're so desperate for accountability because there really just isn't any.
But, Glynnis, the thing is, I mean, holding people accountable is a great thing, but it could come at a great cost. I mean, there was also an attempt on your life. I mean, look at what happened to Andre de Ruyter. He had to flee out of the country after blowing the whistle on a whole lot of things, and especially high-up leadership. They do not like being held accountable and being called out. I mean, does that not scare you in any way?
No, it doesn't scare me in the least. Other people have died with great success, and I'm sure I can too. So no, it doesn't scare me. We've got a job to do, and South Africa is in serious trouble, and I'm not the only person doing this job. There are many people doing this job, calling people out on a daily basis. So, this is not a time for holding back. Our country is in trouble. We need to try and fix it. So everybody has to do whatever they can. And I'm not sure that Andre de Ruyter fled the country in fear of his life. I think that he's possibly had enough and has gone for a while and may well return. I'm not entirely sure that he fled for his life.
Wow, sure. So you started off with a law degree. So how did it happen that you ended up in politics eventually?
Oh, it was entirely by accident. I'm a dreadful politician. I was a prosecutor for 26 years. I loved it. It's in my view still the best job in the world if you can do it honestly. And the reason I left the National Prosecuting Authority was because there was, the prosecuting authority was captured, and Namkobo Jiba, Lawrence Mkhwebi, and their puppy Sean Abrams. Later went after me, disciplined me on trumped-up charges. I was acquitted. I then resigned and joined the DA, and then they prosecuted me criminally for the same charges, and I was acquitted again.
How's that?
So that's why I left the NPA. If not for that, I would certainly still have been there.
Crazy. Glynnis, we'll be right back. Ek dink kom ons doen gou vinnig die verkeer en so en dan gaan ons dit hier nog gaan ons lekker verder gesels. Met advokaat Glynnis Breytenbach, DA Shadow Minister of Justice currently, and Glynnis, I just want to get to the new crime stats that's been published. I think it was on Tuesday or yesterday. I can't remember now exactly. But for the last 90 days, I mean, these figures are crazy. I mean, it works out to about 70 murders per day. Slagoffers van kontakmisdade, I'm just putting the Afrikaans here. One every single 50 seconds in this country takes place. One person every 10 minutes becomes a victim of sexual crime or misconduct. The murders on women has gone up. 969 compared to 899 the previous year. Attempted murders has gone up. It's absolutely horrific to see these figures. Why do you subscribe to these figures? And what's happening?
Well, it's largely thanks to a wholly incompetent top structure in the police. The Minister of Police is, as we've all seen, is not much to write home about. He has an opinionated view of himself that's completely unjustified, and he's not doing a good job, and he never has done. And you'll remember that last time he was the Commissioner of Police, he was drummed out because of a corrupt building tender contract. So he's now back, and why should we expect any better? But the whole top structure of the police is either inexperienced or unwilling or unable, I'm not sure which it is, to actually do their job. This isn't really my portfolio, so I shouldn't be commenting on it. But we've seen how Cele performed in the Bester inquiry. And that's just how he behaves in his ministry, in his portfolio. So, don't expect any great shakes there. He's just delivered his budget speech in Parliament. I had the great misfortune to listen to it. And he again tells us what a good job they're doing, how the crime stats are coming down. And that's just nonsense. They're not. 3 days ago, outside the Wynberg court here in Cape Town, a case gets postponed, a matter gets withdrawn against a particular person so that she can become a state witness. She walks out the door and gets shot in the back in broad daylight in the street. And there are nobody bats an eye. There's no huge outcry. No arrests. We don't hear anything about it. It's just appalling. I mean, people are victims of crime in South Africa on a daily basis. No one feels safe. And certainly no one feels safe even in their own homes. So it's a shocking indictment on the entire criminal justice system, which has, to a very large degree, just crumbled.
And I think, you've said it before, if you had enige ruggraat, if you had anything like that, you would have resigned. But now the thing is, living in denial about these things, why would you? Well,
I think he possibly believes, shame, that he's doing an adequate job. He has delusions of adequacy, which is unfortunate, and he's not the only minister who suffers from that affliction of having delusions of adequacy. And the criminal justice system is not coping with the crime wave, and they're not coping with the crime wave because they refuse to acknowledge the size of the problem, b the cause of the problem, but also, a big cause of the problem in South Africa is we're a violent, aggressive society. So there are an enormous number, an unmanageable number of violent crimes. There are units in the police that specialize in this and are trying, to do their best, but they're under-resourced, both with regards to money and with human resources. There's a serious lack of experience in the police. And so they're unable to cope with this deluge. And, our economy continues to tank thanks to the huge foresight of the government of the day's economic policy. And so the rand continues to get more and more worthless. Our unemployment rate continues to grow. Inflation is killing everybody. There can be nobody in South Africa except those in the absolute super rich bracket who don't feel the effects of our economy and inflation. And so people are desperate.
Absolutely.
A lot of the crime is driven by pure desperation. People need to feed their children.
And I have to ask you, Glynnis, so obviously we know that there are big problems in the top structures of law enforcement in this country. There's no secret about that. And obviously it's also not just one person that can make a difference. But do you believe, and I'm going to actually ask you if you have an opinion, that firstly, do we have someone, or at least a group of people, who are equipped and capable to start turning around the situation with law enforcement? And in your opinion, who do you think would be the ideal Minister for Police right now?
That's a loaded question. So, yes, we do have people. Fortunately for us, we have more than one. We have a whole group of people who certainly could change things around in the entire criminal justice system, both with regards to the police, which is where you need to start, with regards to the prosecution services, which is the middleman between the police and correctional services. The whole criminal justice system needs a revamp, make no mistake. They're interrelated. The one cannot perform optimally without the other also performing optimally. And so it's certainly not an easy job. And when I criticize the current incumbents, it's not because I think it's an easy job. I know it isn't. But we have, in the Western Cape, we have demonstrated that it can be done when you divert resources to where they really matter. The crime stats in the Western Cape look somewhat different to the stats in the rest of the country. Crime has, in fact, decreased. The murder rate has, in fact, decreased. Violence on women has, in fact, decreased, not by massive numbers, but it's a start.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's because we have deployed massive amounts of resources, financial and human, to deal with those issues. We've put our money quite literally where our mouths are, and our program works, our policy works. We've demonstrated that. The stats in the Western Cape are coming down.
Sure.
That's because of a serious, concentrated, concerted effort to deal with those issues. So if it can work here, it can be extrapolated to the rest of the country, and it can certainly work everywhere.
Your ideal minister in the police?
Not that one.
Why don't you become a judge, Advocate Glynnis? Why not?
Ooh, well, first of all, don't call me Advocate Glynnis, because advocate is not a title; it's a job description. So
Wow.
You don't call yourself Broadcaster Ruben, so don't call me.
You'd be surprised.
Okay, well, each to his own. Why don't I become a judge? Well, I don't believe that I'm necessarily qualified to be a judge. I have a rather incendiary personality. I have quite a bit of trouble holding on to my temper. And to be a judge, you need to be able to ascend, above the arena and fairly and equitably and completely objectively view the proceedings unfolding in front of you. And I much prefer being down in the arena, getting a little bit grubby. So I'm not entirely sure that I would make a very good judge.
Let's get to the Thabo Bester saga, because, it's unbelievable, crazy and absolutely bizarre how this whole thing played out. And, it's only known to us now, which is the first issue. What scares people in the face of anyone, the fact that anybody can escape from prison, how on earth does that even happen? What is the latest on this case, by the way?
Well, there's a lot. I firmly believe that we don't know the half of it. This isn't the story. The escape is not the story. There's something behind it that still needs to be discovered, and we're working very hard to try and discover it. It was just too slick, too expertly done, had access to way too many resources for it to have been done by a little Thabo Bester from his single cell in Mangaung. That's not how it happened. 23 people had to look the other way. That cost money.
Yes.
A lot of money. So at least 23 people. In the best case scenario, 23 people. So somebody had to have supplied that kind of money. By all accounts, he lived the life of Riley inside prison, and that also cost money. So, we're trying to follow the money. And we will get to the bottom of it, I can assure you. So the scary thing is that you're quite right. We didn't know, and we only know now. And the only reason we know now is because Ground Up published. And I'm convinced that if they hadn't, we would still not know.
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that if they hadn't published, there was never going to be any kind of proper investigation, any kind of proper attempt to rearrest him. He was out there living the life, shopping at Traps for 8 months, and not a word was said. And the entire top structure of the criminal justice system knew it and did nothing. And if in 8 months they did nothing, please believe me, they had no intention of ever doing anything. And we need to find out why that is, because they're not going to tell us. Shame.
Yeah.
So we need to find out why that is. But we should never forget. People must remember this forever and ever. The Minister of Police and the Minister of Justice thought it was fine to conspire and keep this information from the public, the South African public, who pay their salaries and the salaries of the people who are supposed to incarcerate Bester. It chose not to tell them that there was a convicted serial rapist and murderer running around South Africa and they didn't know where he was. And worse than that, they chose not to warn or protect or support his previous victims.
Yeah.
Sure.
And that, in my view, when they bleat on daily about how seriously they take gender-based violence, that just gives the lie to that line, because clearly they don't give a damn.
Yeah.
Ja. Ons gaan hierna gaan ons verder gesels, bly net vir jou. Ons advokaat Glynnis Breytenbach. I said it quickly. I just said it very quickly. Advocate Glynnis, I just said it quickly. Wat by ons aansluit vanoggend om 'n bietjie te gesels oor die Thabo Bester saga en 'n hele paar goeders waarmee sy besig is, en ek moet vir jou sê, iemand wat nie bang is om te praat en goeders uitroep, en as my verbasend is en is wat Glynnis sê ook, why is everybody fussing about this? This should be the standard. I know you speak of the private prisons being much better managed and equipped. The question is, how do we now fix correctional services?
I don't know that they're much better managed.
Right.
They're certainly better equipped and better resourced. So they have a better ratio of wardens to inmates, and they have a lot more money to spend on the prison. They have state-of-the-art equipment, which didn't help at all on the night that Bester escaped. So in that sense, they're much more modern than generally South African prisons. Our prisons are generally old and decrepit and in a shocking state of disrepair. And frankly, a lot of them are just by their existence human rights abuses. And absolutely nobody should have to be incarcerated in that state. So, our prison service needs a serious overhaul. And again, I know this is a big job, and it's easy for me to sit here and say all of this. Different matter altogether to do it. But the fact of the matter is we need to do it. It's no good just carrying on and on and on with these buildings that are falling down, that are in a shocking state of disrepair, that are dangerous, that are freezing cold, and that are overcrowded by sometimes 57%.
Sure.
So the private prisons are never overcrowded. They have a finite amount of bed space, and they're always 100. They have to be contractually 100% full, but never overfull. So there's never more inmates than bed space in the private prisons. They have much better facilities because they're much newer, and they're much cleaner. They're much more hygienic, and frankly, that's the kind of bang you get for your buck when you're paying upwards of 45 million a month for such a prison to be run. The other prisons don't have that kind of money to spend.
Sure.
Glynnis, I have to ask you something. So literally just as a member of the South African public, it is your job, let's say, for example, as part of the Oversight Committee, to hold people accountable. And that's something that I'm feeling a little bit of a catch-22 just as a South African citizen, because I know that there are a lot of these type of oversight committees and oversight structures in our parliament and just in our justice system, for example, as a whole. And then on the other side, I feel like when something happens, a oversight committee or an investigation committee is appointed. And when we spoke about this earlier, when we knew we were going to speak to you, Ruben actually told me about a very interesting analogy that he found. and I want him to share it with you because I really would like to just have your opinion on this, also as someone that's part of an oversight committee.
So Ugandan economist and author Eli Tunyeyo Kamehusha, he couldn't have said it better. He says the following: when you discover that you are riding a dead horse, the best strategy is to dismount, bury the horse, and get a living horse. However, in Africa, more advanced strategies are often employed, such as, and I'm quoting here, buying a stronger whip. Number 2, appointing a committee to study the horse. Number 3, changing riders. Number 4, arranging to visit other countries to see how other cultures ride dead horses. Number 5, lowering the standards so that the dead horse can be included. Number 6, reclassifying the dead horse as living impaired. Number 7, hiring outside contractors to ride the dead horse. Number 8, harnessing several dead horses together to increase the speed. Number 9, providing additional funding to increase the dead horse's performance. Number 10, rewriting the expected performance requirement for all horses. And lastly, number 11, promoting the dead horse to supervisory position. Nailed it.
So, Glynnis, tell me, do we have a country full of dead horses, or do we need better jockeys and new horses?
I saw that a couple of days ago, and I had a good laugh because it's very opposite. And certainly that would appear to describe perfectly the approach of our government to life, to harness as many dead horses as they can find. And when they fail to perform, they promote them.
Yeah.
So, yes, we don't have a country of dead horses. South Africa is a wonderful, vibrant country, and we have the prospects of a great future. We've always had the prospects of a great future, and we still do. We need to get rid of the dead horses, and we all know how that should be done. It's very easy. Get off your tochas and go and vote next year in the election, and remember that you get the government you vote for. If you want a government of dead horses, well, then, we've got plenty of those, and you know who you should vote for if that's what you want, dead horses. Having said that, there are, Parliament doesn't just set up committees when something happens. Each portfolio, so justice, correctional services, SCOPA, security agencies, economics, finances, they all have SOEs, they all have their own portfolio committees, and they all perform oversight many days a week. And that work goes largely unnoticed because some of it is very mundane. But in fact, it's tallying up the rands and cents, approving budgets, and then for the next year, trying your best to make sure that the budget is spent on the things that they said they would spend it on, and optimally, and to get the best performance and to squeeze the most out of every rand. So that's what oversight committees generally do, and they don't. It's not that they get set up just when something happens, although it is the president's go-to stance. As soon as something happens, he sets up a committee to discuss whether a committee should be set up or not.
Yes.
So if we can get past that and get to a point where South Africans vote for people who will actually do something. We have demonstrated that they can and will do something, and there are many such people. Then certainly we can turn South Africa around. At the moment, our economy is tanking. We're in a dire position, and I don't think anyone. I'm sorry, all the birds in Cape Town have now descended on the garden. We're in a dire position. I don't think any of us are under any illusion about how serious our position is. But South Africa has, I'm in a very privileged position to meet many hundreds of South Africans every month. And it never ceases to amaze me how resilient they are, how innovative they are, and how optimistic they are. And so I absolutely know that if we can turn this ship around, and we can, but then, we have to get rid of the ANC. There's no other way. They've had 30 years to demonstrate an iota of competence, and they've failed dismally. So, it's time for them to move along. make space for people who can and will do the job. And then, of course, we can turn this around. It will take time. It will be difficult. I have no illusions about the size of the mountain we're going to have to climb. But I also know that we have plenty of people who are willing and able to climb that mountain.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much, just from a normal South African perspective, Glynnis, for being someone that actually speaks for the masses and asking the questions that we actually don't always even know that have to be asked.
Yeah, Glynnis, and also I think we speak, like she said, for so many people. Thank you for just being bold and like you said, you stated it earlier, just being what it should be. But I mean, we still honor you for that, and thank you for the hard work that you're doing. We really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Cheers. Bye. All right.